Today we're going to be talking about plagiarism and academic honesty. Usually this is part of my syllabus lesson, but I wanted to break up some of these videos so they weren't quite so long for you or for me to make. So let's get started on plagiarism. To do this, we're going to talk about three different areas. We're going to talk about academic honesty, we're going to talk about the definition of plagiarism, and we're going to talk about the types of plagiarism. The fifth one will surprise you. So academic honesty, like all of your classes, zero tolerance for cheating, plagiarism, or etc. is going to be accepted in my class or in college. Directly from my syllabus, it says, the fact of your continued enrollment in this course is prima facie evidence of your agreement to the policies and conditions set forth in this syllabus. Basically, it's saying, if you stay in this class, you understand my policy and you state that you will not plagiarize. But one of the things I learned a little bit later in my own college experience is that there's a lot of different definitions of plagiarism, and that's something I want you all to understand better. So, what is plagiarism, and what are some of those examples? Now, a lot of us have heard this definition before. Plagiarism is the act of taking another person's writing, conversation, song, or even idea and passing it off as your own. This includes information from web pages, books, songs, television shows, email messages, interviews, articles, artworks, or any other medium. Whenever you paraphrase, summarize, or take words, phrases, or sentences from another person's work, it is necessary to indicate the source of that information within your paper or speech, not just at the end in the references. That's going to be really important in this class, citing every fact that you use. So the different types of plagiarism that we're going to talk about today is copy and pasting text of somebody else's work without quotes and without a citation, paraphrasing without a citation. We're not going to talk about purchasing material or using another student's material. I think most of us understand that at this point. If you don't, feel free to reach out and I'll answer those questions. Reproducing information that is not common knowledge, self-evident without a citation, or using your own past graded or published material without a citation. Most students don't know about that, so I like to make sure that you understand that that is considered plagiarism. Now, most of us are probably familiar with this version of plagiarism, the copy and paste method. The copy and paste method is something like taking this line, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and claiming it as my own. So how would we ensure that a direct copy and paste isn't considered plagiarism? In this class, we use APA, not MLA, as a reference source. So this is actually from Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities, written in 1859. And this quote is in page 1. So the way that APA, that we would ensure that this is no longer considered plagiarism, is we would put the line in quotes, as you can see that we've done here. It was the worst of times, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. After the quote and before the period, we've put down the author's name, the year it was published, and the page of the quote. So Dickens, 1859, P period 1 period. I understand in MLA, a lot of times it would just be the last name and the page of the information, but that's not what we require in APA. So in APA, it's the last name, it's the year of publication, and it's the page, if it's a direct quote. If it's paraphrasing, it's a little different. When we're talking about speeches, it can be really tough to use a giant quote from an author. First of all, it's written text, and we don't talk the same way we write. So you may find a quote like what follows, but you want to put it into your own words. For example, for centuries, men in the Middle East have gathered around hookahs to puff fruit-scented smoke, talk, and pass the time. In the West, however, the water pipe became synonymous with drug culture in the 1960s, an association that lingers. But in the past couple of years, the hookah has been resurrected in youth-oriented coffee houses, restaurants, and bars, supplanting the cigar as the tobacco fad of the moment. As we did with the Dickens quote, the entire statement is in quotes, followed by a parentheses, the author's last name, Bernstein, comma, the year it was written, comma, and the page where it can be found. But as I said, maybe we don't want to say this huge quote in the middle of a speech. It can be rather hard to read that much information when you've got anxiety going on and uncertainty and are trying to connect. So instead, you might find that it's more useful to paraphrase. For example, you might paraphrase it saying, men in the Mideast have used hookahs to puff smoke for centuries. The hookahs have been resurrected today in coffee houses, restaurants, bars, replacing cigars. However, unless you tell the reader where you got this information, it's considered plagiarism. To ensure that your paraphrased information is not plagiarized, you still need to put an in-text citation at the end. You'll notice that I took off the page number as it is no longer necessary since it is not a direct quote. When a student plagiarizes information through paraphrasing without an in-text citation, it's normally because they do not understand their actions or the potential consequences. At this college, even if you plagiarize unintentionally, it can result in disciplinary action. But simply forgetting to cite is not always the case. So our first example of plagiarism here, if you want to go ahead and click on it, it will take you to a Comedy Central website. You can just watch up to 1 minute and 6 seconds. Welcome back. I'm hoping that you went and watched the video. A question remains after watching this. Was this an inadvertent mistake of Melania Trump or a more calculated act of plagiarism? Do you think this was purposeful to steal the words from Michelle Obama's speech just 8 years before? Personally, I think it was an example of someone trying to paraphrase, but they never gave proper credit, and they failed to remove all the original text. The original text got moved into the language, into the speech, as if it was their own. And without that proper citation, without making due diligence, they ended up being rather embarrassed by the entire event. Of course, the larger question is, does it matter? The Trump administration did deny the plagiarism until Turnitin.com, a couple of you are probably familiar with that program, determined through a computer algorithm that it was a 1 in a trillion chance the same language was used in the same format. The damage was done. Here's another great example. You grew up in California like I did.
If anybody had an ocean across the USA, then everybody be surfing across like California. You'd see them wearing their baggies, where Archie sandals do, a bushy blonde hair, surfing USA. Keep pushing through the napkin, but you're counting lines. You just had a cruise and play. I'll see if there are things all over Manhattan, and down the mini waves. Surfing USA. We'll all be planning our route. We're gonna take you soon. We're waxing down our surfboards. We can't wait for June. We'll all be gone for the summer. We're on safari to stay. You tell the teacher we're surfing USA. Hang your knees and swallow. Pacific Palisades. Sailing up the answers. Down a beach in LA. All over the point. At Waimea Bay. Surfing USA. Let's turn him loose.
A few years.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Berry, Sweet Little 16.
They're really rocking in Boston and Pittsburgh, PA, deep in the heart of Texas and around the Frisco Bay, all over St. Louis and down in New Orleans. All the cats wanna dance with Sweet Little 16. Sweet Little 16. She just got to have about $500,000. Famed autograph. Her wallet filled with pictures. She gets them one by one. Becomes so excited. Watch her look at her run, boy. Oh, mommy, mommy, leave me I go. Just a sight to see. Somebody steal the show. Oh, daddy, daddy, I beg you. Whisper to mommy, it's alright with you. Cause they'll be rocking on Bandstand, Philadelphia, PA, deep in the heart of Texas, around the Frisco Bay, all over St. Louis, way down in New Orleans. All the cats wanna dance with Sweet Little 16. She's got the grown-up blues, tight dresses and lipstick. She's sporting high-heel shoes. Oh, but tomorrow morning she'll have to change her trim and be Sweet 16 and back in class again. But they'll be rocking in Boston, Pittsburgh, PA, deep in the heart of Texas and round the Frisco Bay.
Now, common knowledge can be harder to feel comfortable about, and this is the exception. We're paraphrasing, you're taking somebody else's information, so you have to make sure you cite it. There is an exception to the rule, and that's common knowledge. So something like President Obama was our first black president. That's pretty much common knowledge. You could pop that phrase itself into Google and probably come back with 1 trillion responses within seconds. Another good example might be Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. It doesn't need to be cited. There's so many people who have done that work. We all know it. The sky is blue, grass is green. However, if you're feeling uncomfortable, feel free to cite it. It's better to oversight than to undercite. That being said, you always have to be careful about what people know. For example, I had a student who was doing a speech on Bob Marley, and she wanted to do it in a categorical or topical organization pattern. She wanted to talk about 3 different songs by Bob Marley. And I said, ooh, I think that's a great idea. What are the 3 songs? And she said, well, I want to do this one. I said, that's great. And she said, I want to do that one. I said, that's perfect. And then she said, for the final song, I want to sing Don't Worry. I want to talk about Don't Worry, Be Happy. It took me a second, and I asked her again, you mean Don't Worry, Be Happy, the upbeat song? And she said, yes. And I said, I don't think that he wrote that. So we went to Google and we put in Bob Marley, Don't Worry, Be Happy, and these are the actual results from the Google page. You'll notice at the very top, YouTube, Bob Marley, Don't Worry, Be Happy. Second one, YouTube, Bob Marley, Don't Worry, Be Happy. The third one, Don't Worry, Be Happy, is Wikipedia. The fourth one, Bob Marley lyrics. The fifth one, it was a question. The sixth one, it looks like it's lyrics again. The truth of the matter is it was not written by Bob Marley or ever performed by Bob Marley. It was written and performed by a guy named Bobby McFerrin in 1988. And since Bob Marley died in 1981, it'd be hell of a feat if he actually performed that song. So we always have to be careful about what we think we know. If we don't have a cite for it, you may be wrong. And that's okay. That's what college is about. Finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about is unique phrases. So a unique phrase might be something like, may the force be with you, or may the odds be ever in your favor. And these do have to be cited. Just last semester, I had a student who wasn't familiar with Star Wars, so she wouldn't understand may the force be with you. So always make sure that unique phrases, even if you think that they are commonplace, that you make sure that you cite them. One of the biggest things that people forget about is collections of research. You can't use someone else's collection of research and call it your own. You might see this in multiple ways. If a newspaper article cites a scientific research page, you cannot cite the research paper unless you specifically track down and read that research paper. So, for example, if you were doing a speech on medical marijuana and you found this great page with all of these high-quality quotes on them, would quoting these people, like the Honorable Francis Young, be plagiarism? The short answer is yes. Yes, because you are using someone else's work and passing off the research as your own. Furthermore, do you know that these quotes are real, or if the context is correct? However, not all is lost. A page like this, you do not have to forgo all of the information. You can research the information from the page. Take one of those quotes. Figure out where it was taken. Was it taken in or out of context? So what do I mean by context? This is a great example of how quotes are part of a quote can be used out of context and why it's important to go to the source.
If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
My father's hands didn't build this company. My hands didn't build this company. My son's hands aren't building this company. Did somebody else take out the loan on my father's house to finance the equipment? Did somebody else make payroll every week to figure out where it's coming from? President Obama, you're killing us out here. Through hard work and a little bit of luck, we built this business. Why are you demonizing us for it? We are the solution, not the problem. It's time we had somebody who believes in us. Someone who believes that achievement should be rewarded, not punished. We need somebody who believes in America.
The idea to say that Steve Jobs didn't build Apple, that Henry Ford didn't build Ford Motor, to say something like that is not just foolishness, it's insulting to every entrepreneur, every innovator in America, and it's wrong. President Obama attacks success, and therefore under President Obama we have less success, and I will change that.
The quote in question was, if you built a business, that you didn't build that.
People who've worked hard, started a business, and created jobs can't believe what President Obama is saying about them.
If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
Oh.
Unbelievable.
What an insult.
I am outraged.
I can't believe he just said that.
I can't believe the President of the United States could say that I have not made this.
The government had practically nothing to do with it. If anything, government gets in our way.
We've worked for everything we've gotten.
We risk everything every day.
Came from my own personal savings.
I've invested 5 years
20 years.
into my business.
And Mr. President, I don't think you understand that.
But the President of the United States would be that unsupportive.
Now we really know how he feels about small business.
The backbone of America.
We're here to help improve this economy.
The American dream is being lost.
You didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
To rebuild the American dream, we need a president who believes in the American dream.
Here's another ad taking the same exact quote or part of a quote and using it in a context. But it's your question as students whether or not that context is correct. Here's the original context.
If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. There are a whole bunch of hard-working people out there. If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we had that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, that you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. The internet didn't get invented on its own.
So when we review, if you build a business, that you didn't build that, he's not talking about the business. He's talking about the bridges. He's talking about the roads. And yet, if you only paid attention to the original two commercials, the context was changed in drastic ways. This is why it's important to go back and figure out if the context is in the light of the author and not being taken out of context. But that doesn't mean that all is lost. A page like this, you don't have to forgo the information. Instead, you can research the information on the page and figure out if the source of the quote was taken out of context. Very quickly, I took that very first quote, I popped it into Google Scholar, and it came up with a whole book, rather than just a sound bite on a page. It's going to give you a better understanding of where the quote came from and what the background is. This is something that can also be done in Wikipedia. Wikipedia is never, ever, ever, ever an appropriate reference. However, it's not a bad place to start, especially if you have a really dense topic and you're having a hard time kind of struggling through it with a textbook that's not written maybe as well as you'd like. Going to Wikipedia and looking up a term or a topic or an idea or a history era can really help break down the overall image so you can get a better foundation. It also has these wonderful references all the way at the bottom. A lot of them you can directly link to the article where Wikipedia came up with that information. Good place to start. I will not allow the use of Wikipedia as a source, okay? So I'm going to say that again. Had a couple students this semester try to submit that. Not going to work. The final rule of plagiarism, the final way that you can plagiarize, is actually by self-plagiarizing. The rule of thumb is if you got a grade for it, you got paid for it, or it's on your resume, don't reuse it. So the top 5 reasons why somebody plagiarizes in class. Number 1, they panic. They panic because of poor time management skills or outside influences, and they've backed themselves into a corner. I have a very clear late policy. Don't feel that one thing and you're going to be screwed in this class, because that's not the way it works. Take a step back, send me a message, and let me know what's going on. Number 2, you fail to cite that paraphrased material. You put down that this person was born on this date, you better tell me where you got that information from. Otherwise, it's considered plagiarizing. Some students have a difficult time integrating the source material into their own language. They're having that hard time going from that giant quote to what they want to say. This is one of the greatest things about being in a public speaking class. Literally turn to your friend and say, hey, I'm going to tell you this information. And then use that language to inform your speech. We don't write and talk the same way. So don't think that somebody else's writing is going to be what you want to say during a speech. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just paraphrase it for your friend in a very casual way, and a lot of times that's going to give you a better language than trying to fit all those fancy words into a speech. Number 4 is different educational expectations. People who didn't grow up in California or didn't grow up into the States may have very, very different understandings of what plagiarism is, which is why I want to talk about it during the first couple lessons of class. Everybody should be on the same footing now. And number 5 is they don't care. Well, some students don't. Some students come in here and they just want to get it done. I'm hoping that by the end of this class, you do care. Speaking well, speaking in organization is one of the best things that you can do for your career, regardless what career you go into. So, to summarize, we talked about what plagiarism is, which is the act of taking another person's writing, conversation, song, or idea and passing it off as your own. This includes copying and pasting direct quotations without citations, paraphrasing without citation, purchasing material or using another student's material, reproducing information that is not common knowledge, self-evident without citation, using your own past graded or published material without a citation. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them below or send me an email and I'll get back to them as soon as I can.